The day I had been waiting for had finally arrived. I, Emily Dubois, was going to get married in a few hours. Standing in the grand hall of the Château de Chambord, I felt my heart racing, a mixture of excitement and nervousness overwhelming me. The place was simply magical, like something out of a fairy tale. The centuries-old stone walls seemed to whisper eternal love stories, while the large windows let in the golden light of this beautiful June day. Around me, everything was beauty and elegance. Delicate floral arrangements adorned every corner, their subtle scents mingling with the woody scent of the castle. Candles scattered here and there created an intimate and romantic atmosphere, their soft glow dancing on the walls. I could hear the happy hubbub of guests beginning to arrive, their voices mixing with the soothing melody of a string quartet playing Debussy. My dress, a custom creation by a famous Parisian couturier, fitted my shape perfectly. The Calais lace bustier highlighted my figure, while the full tulle and silk skirt cascaded to the floor. I felt like a princess, ready to live my modern fairy tale. My bridesmaids, Marie and Sophie, my best friends since high school, were bustling around me, adjusting a lock of hair here, smoothing out a crease in my dress there. Their presence soothed me, their smiles and words of encouragement reminding me how lucky I was to have them by my side on this special day. "You are beautiful, Emily," Marie said to me, her eyes shining with emotion. "David is going to take his breath away when he sees you." David. My future husband. Just thinking about him made my heart swell with love. We met 3 years ago, during an opening at the art gallery where I worked. He had come to accompany his mother, a renowned collector, and our eyes met over a painting by Monet. It was love at first sight, as they say. Since then, we had gone through life's ups and downs together, supporting each other in our careers and dreams. The hall clock chimed softly, reminding me that the long-awaited moment was approaching. In a few minutes, the doors would open and I would walk up the aisle on my father's arm. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the butterflies in my stomach. That's when everything changed. The doors to the hall burst open, the noise echoing through the space like a clap of thunder. All eyes turned towards the entrance, including mine. And there, in the doorway, stood Margaret, my future mother-in-law. Margaret Leroy was an imposing woman, both in terms of her presence and her reputation. Tall, elegant, always impeccably coiffed and dressed, she embodied the Parisian bourgeoisie in all its splendor. But that day, it wasn't her Chanel suit that attracted attention, it was the expression on her face. His eyes, usually so calm and calculating, shone with a cold determination that made my blood run cold. A murmur ran through the assembly as Margaret walked towards me with determined steps. I could feel the tension building in the room, as if the air itself was charged with electricity. The guests parted as he passed, some whispering behind their hands, others observing the scene with barely concealed curiosity. Margaret stopped a few feet from me, her steely gaze fixed on mine. I felt Marie and Sophie move closer instinctively, as if to protect me. But nothing could have prepared me for what was to come. Without preamble, without even a hello, Margaret spoke the words that would change the course of that day, and my life. "If you want to marry my son," she said in a low but clear voice, each syllable echoing in the sudden silence of the room, "you will pay me 100,000 euros. Otherwise, you can say goodbye to this marriage." The shock froze me in place. My mind refused to comprehend what I had just heard. Was it a joke? A nightmare I was going to wake up from? But Margaret's implacable gaze left no doubt as to her seriousness. I felt everyone's eyes turn towards me, waiting for my reaction. The silence that followed Margaret's ultimatum was deafening. I could almost hear the frantic beating of my heart, the blood pulsing in my temples. 1,000 thoughts swirled in my head. How dare she? Why was she doing this? Where was David? What should I do? I glanced around me, searching for support, a friendly face, anything to ground me in this surreal reality. My eyes met those of my father, standing a little further away. His face reflected a mixture of shock and indignation. My mother, beside him, had put a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Time seemed to have stopped. Each second stretched into infinity as I struggled to find an answer, a way to deal with this impossible situation. I knew that my decision, whatever it was, would have irreversible consequences. On the one hand, there was the love I had for David, the dreams we had built together, the life we had planned. On the other, there was my dignity, my principles, everything I believed in. As I stood there, the center of attention, dressed in white and ready to start a new life, I realized that this moment would define me, not as a wife, but as a woman. I took a deep breath, drawing from deep within myself the strength I needed. Slowly, I raised my head, meeting Margaret's gaze with renewed determination. The fate of my marriage, of my future, rested on my next decision. And as the world seemed to hold its breath around me, I knew exactly what I had to do. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all the eyes on me. The air in the room seemed to have thickened, charged with palpable tension. I could almost hear the frantic beating of my heart, pounding in my ears like a war drum. Despite the storm of emotions raging within me, I tried to maintain my outward calm. "I won't pay you anything at all," I declared in a firm voice, surprising myself by the force and clarity of my words. "This is my wedding, and I refuse to be manipulated or intimidated." Margaret's eyes narrowed, her lips pursing into a thin line. His face, usually so composed, now betrayed barely contained anger. I could almost see the wheels turning in his mind, searching for a new strategy to bend me to his will. A murmur ran through the room, a mixture of shock and admiration. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my parents exchange a look of pride. My mother, Elise, seemed about to get up to join me, but my father, Jean, placed a calming hand on her arm, instinctively understanding that this was my fight. The tension in the room was palpable, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see how the situation would unfold. I felt Marie and Sophie move closer to me, their silent presence offering me tacit support that comforted me. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into, little one," Margaret hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. "Do you really think you can be part of our family without contributing anything?" His words hurt me more than I wanted to admit. From the beginning of my relationship with David, I had always felt that Margaret saw me as inferior, not good enough for her precious son. Despite my best efforts to gain his approval, nothing ever seemed enough. "What I bring, Madame Leroy," I replied, trying to remain calm, "is my love for David, my support, and my desire to build a life together. If that is not enough to your eyes, then maybe it's you who doesn't understand what a family really is." A collective gasp ran through the assembly. No one had ever dared to stand up to Margaret like this. I saw several guests exchange impressed glances, while others seemed uncomfortable, as if they were witnessing a scene they should not have seen. Margaret seemed momentarily unsettled by my response. His mask of superiority cracked for a moment, revealing a glimmer of surprise, even reluctant respect. But it only lasted a split second before his face hardened again. "You know nothing about our world," she spat. "You're just a little gallery employee who thinks she's a princess. How dare you talk to me like that?" His words were like daggers, aimed at putting me down, making me doubt myself. But strangely, instead of hurting me, they only strengthened my resolve. I suddenly realized that I was tired of feeling inferior, tired of trying to please someone who would never accept me for who I was. "Your world, Madame Leroy," I replied, my voice gaining confidence with each word, "is not the one I want to live in. If being accepted into your family means denying my values and my dignity, then can be that this marriage is a mistake." A heavy silence fell over the room. I had just said out loud what many had been thinking quietly for months. The idea that I could give up on marriage seemed inconceivable just a few minutes ago, but now that it was formulated, it was taking root in my mind. That's when I realized something was missing. Or rather, someone. David. My fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry in a few minutes, was conspicuous by his absence. Where was he while his mother tried to sabotage our marriage? As if my thoughts had summoned him, I finally saw him, making his way through the crowd. My heart leapt in my chest, a mixture of hope and apprehension washing over me. Was he finally going to take a stand? Defend myself against his mother? David approached, his face wearing an expression I couldn't decipher. He looked at his mother, then at me, then back at his mother. And that's where I saw it. A smile. Not a warm or comforting smile, but an amused grin that chilled me to the bone. "David," I whispered, incomprehension and fear mixing in my voice. He turned to me, that same smile still plastered on his face. "Oh, Emily," he said in an almost condescending tone. "You didn't think all this was serious?" I felt the ground slipping away from under my feet. The world around me seemed to spin, the faces of the guests transforming into a blurry sea of colors. How was this possible? The man I loved, the one I trusted absolutely, was standing there, openly mocking me in front of all our guests. What do you mean?" I stammered, refusing to believe what I was hearing. David exchanged a knowing look with his mother before turning to me again. "Come on, Emily. You're charming, really. But you didn't think I was actually going to marry you? A little gallery worker with no money or connections. It was amusing, I admit, but it's time to get back to reality." Every word was like a stab in my heart. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Instead, I clenched my fists, tapping into a strength I didn't know I had. "So all of that, those 3 years, our love, was it a lie?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly despite my efforts to remain calm. David shrugged his shoulders with a nonchalance that repulsed me. "Let's call it a pleasant hobby. But it's time to grow up, Emily. My mother is right. In our world, feelings aren't enough. You have to know what you bring to the table." I looked around me, searching for support, a friendly face in this sea of strangers. My eyes met those of my parents. My mother was crying silently, while my father seemed about to intervene, his face red with anger. My friends, Marie and Sophie, had come closer, ready to support me if I faltered. It was then that something broke inside me. But it wasn't my heart, as one might have thought. No, it was the invisible chains that held me back, that made me doubt my worth, that pushed me to seek approval from others. In an instant, I saw through their game. They had wanted to humiliate me, demean me, make me feel small and insignificant. But they had failed. I sat up, throwing my shoulders back. In a clear, loud voice, I addressed the gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am sorry for wasting your time. It looks like there will be no wedding today." Shocked murmurs ran through the crowd, but I ignored them. I turned to David and Margaret, who seemed stunned by my reaction. They probably expected to see me break down, beg, cry. But I was beyond all that. "You thought you could break me," I told them, my voice betraying no emotion. "But all you managed to do was free me. I'll never be good enough for your world. And you know what? I don't care anymore. Because your world, with its money, its lies, and its cruelty, is worth nothing compared to integrity and true love." I saw Margaret's face fall, her carefully orchestrated plan crumbling before her. David seemed lost, as if he no longer knew what role to play. "Emily," he began, but I interrupted him with a wave of my hand. "No, David. You had your chance to speak. Now it's over. I will not be your victim, nor your entertainment. I am better than that, and I deserve better than that." With these words, I turned to my parents and my friends. "We're leaving," I said simply. They nodded, immediately getting up to join me. As we headed towards the exit, I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. Yes, my heart was broken. Yes, I was humiliated and betrayed. But I was also stronger than I had ever been. As I passed through the castle gates, I took one last look back. The room was frozen in a surreal picture, shocked guests, Margaret fuming, and David, alone in the middle of it all, suddenly seeming very small and insignificant. I took a deep breath of the fresh air outside. This was supposed to be the first day of the rest of my life. And in a way, it was. Just not in the way I had imagined. But as I walked into the unknown, surrounded by the people who truly loved me, I knew everything would be okay. Because I had found something much more precious than a marriage, I had found myself. As I stood there, facing David and Margaret, feeling the anger and disappointment building within me, I didn't expect what would come next. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. It was at that moment that Margaret, her face red with rage, made a sudden gesture that took me completely by surprise. With a quick, fluid movement, she grabbed a bottle of wine from a nearby table. I saw her raise her arm, her eyes flashing with fury. Before anyone could react, she threw the bottle in my direction with surprising force for a woman her age. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the bottle spinning in the air, the dark red liquid glistening in the light of the chandeliers. I heard muffled screams around me, but I was frozen in place, unable to move. The shock of the impact brought me back to reality. The bottle shattered against my shoulder, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The wine spilled onto my dress, quickly soaking into the pristine white fabric. I felt the cold liquid flow down my body, irreparably staining the delicate lace and precious silk. A dead silence fell over the assembly. The guests stared at the scene with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. My mother let out a muffled cry, while my father rushed towards me, his face contorted with anger. For a moment, I stood still, in shock. The intoxicating scent of wine mingled with the metallic smell of blood. I had cut myself with a shard of glass. The pain, absent at first, began to make itself felt, a throbbing burn where the glass had cut me. "Emily, sweetheart, are you okay?" My mother's worried voice woke me from my torpor. She was at my side now, her hands trembling, trying to assess the damage. I blinked, trying to regain my composure. That's when I heard it. A laugh. Not just any laugh, but David's. My fiancé, no, my ex-fiancé, was laughing. The sound of his amusement echoed through the room, contrasting shockingly with the stunned silence of the guests. I slowly turned my head towards him, not believing my ears. David stood there, a smirk on his lips, visibly amused by the situation. Beside him, his mother looked satisfied, as if she had just won a great victory. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. All the pain, the anger, the frustration that I had accumulated over the last few minutes exploded inside me. I felt a wave of pure rage wash over me, erasing all traces of shock or pain. "Do you think that's funny?" I shouted at David, my voice echoing in the silent room. "Do you think it's funny to see me humiliated, hurt?" David at least had the decency to look a little embarrassed, but his smile didn't completely leave his lips. "Come on, Emily," he said in a condescending tone. "You have to admit it's a bit comical. You, in your beautiful white dress, now red like Bordeaux wine. It's almost poetic." His words hit me like a slap. How could I have been so blind? How could I love this man, believe in him, want to spend the rest of my life with him? The person I thought I knew didn't exist. In his place stood a cruel and callous stranger. "Poetic," I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. "You want some poetry, David? Here's a poem for you. Roses are red, violets are blue. I thought I loved you, but you're just a asshole." Gasps of surprise were heard in the assembly. I wasn't one to swear, especially not in public, but at that moment, propriety was the least of my worries. "Emily," my mother exclaimed, shocked by my language. But I wasn't finished. The words poured out of my mouth like a torrent, releasing all the frustration and disappointment I had built up. "You know what, David? I thank you. Yes, you heard me correctly. I thank you for showing me your true colors before it was too late. I thank you for sparing my life of lies and contempt, and above all, I thank you for giving me the strength to say no to all of that." I turned to Margaret, who was looking at me with a mixture of anger and surprise. "And you, Madame Leroy? You thought you would break me, humiliate me, but all you managed to do was free me. Your money, your social status, your contempt, all that is worthless compared to integrity and self-respect." A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw several guests nod, visibly impressed by my reaction. It was then that I realized something. Despite the wine dripping down my dress, despite the pain of the cut on my arm, despite the public humiliation I had just suffered, I felt strong. Stronger than I had ever been. I squared my shoulders, ignoring the cold liquid sticking the fabric to my skin. In a clear and confident voice, I addressed the assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am sorry that you had to witness this deplorable scene. As you can see, there will be no wedding today. Please excuse me, but I think it's time for me to leave." I turned to my parents and friends, who were looking at me with a mixture of concern and pride. "Here we go?" I asked simply. They nodded silently, getting up to join me. Marie and Sophie quickly surrounded me, forming a protective barrier between me and the rest of the room. As we headed towards the exit, I heard David's voice behind me. "Emily, wait. You can't leave like that." I stopped suddenly and turned around slowly. David stood there, suddenly looking uncertain, as if he finally realized the significance of his actions. "I can't leave like this," I repeated, my voice calm but firm. "Look at me carefully, David. That's exactly what I'm going to do. You're fired." A collective gasp ran through the room. David's eyes widened in surprise. "Fired? But, you can't fire me. We're not in the office here." I couldn't help but smile, a smile without joy but full of determination. "Oh yes, I can. I'm kicking you out of my life, David. You, your mother, your shenanigans, your contempt, all that is over. I deserve better, and I'm going to find better." With these words, I turned around and walked decisively towards the exit. I felt the eyes on me, heard the whispers as I passed, but for the first time in my life, I didn't care at all. I felt like I was waking up from a long sleep, seeing the world with new eyes. As I walked through the castle gates, I took a deep breath. The cool evening air hit my face, like a welcome caress after the stifling heat of the room. I looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. "And now?" my mother asked softly, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. I turned to her, to my father, to my faithful friends. Their faces reflected concern, but also deep support. I then realized that I had everything I needed right there. "Now," I replied with a smile, the first real smile in what seemed like forever, "we're going home. We're taking off this ruined dress, we're opening a bottle of champagne, and we're celebrating." "Celebrate what?" my father asked, a little confused. "My freedom, Dad. My new start. The fact that I avoided making the biggest mistake of my life." Marie and Sophie applauded, their faces lighting up with knowing smiles. My mother wiped away a tear, but her eyes were full of pride. As we walked to the car, I took one last look back. The castle stood, majestic and impassive, a silent witness to what had just happened. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness for the broken dreams, for the love I thought I had found. But that sadness was quickly replaced by a feeling of excitement and hope. The future was uncertain, sure, but it was also full of possibilities. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free, truly myself. As I got into the car, surrounded by the people who truly loved me, I knew everything was going to be okay. It wasn't the end I had imagined for this day, but maybe it was the beginning I needed. And as the car drove away from the castle, taking with it the remains of my old dreams, I felt a smile appear on my lips. The adventure was only just beginning. The journey back from the castle took place in an emotionally charged silence. Sitting in the back of my parents' car, I watched the night landscape of the French countryside pass by, the lights of sleeping villages twinkling in the distance like terrestrial stars. The wedding dress, now stained and torn, lay in a heap on the seat next to me, a silent symbol of this nightmarish day. "Sweetheart," my mother began, turning to me from the passenger seat, "are you sure you don't want to press charges against Margaret? What she did was assault." I sighed, running a hand through my messy hair. "No, Mom. I don't want anything to do with this family anymore. Filing a complaint would only prolong this whole thing." My father, who had been driving in silence until now, interjected, "Your mother is right, Emily. What they did to you is unforgivable. They shouldn't get away with this." I understood their anger, I felt it too. But deep down, I knew that engaging in a legal battle would only keep me trapped in the past that I so wanted to leave behind. "I know you want to protect me," I said softly, "but the best revenge will be to live my life to the fullest and be happy. That's the only thing that will truly enrage them." Marie, sitting to my left, took my hand and squeezed it gently. "You're right, Em. And we'll be here to help you rebuild your life." Sophie, on the other side, nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. Besides, I already have some ideas to take your mind off things. How about a little girls' trip?" The idea made me smile despite myself. My friends, loyal and loving, were there for me during this difficult time. Their presence was like a balm on my bruised heart. When we finally arrived at my parents' house, a wave of fatigue washed over me. The events of the day, the intense emotions, all of it had exhausted me. I went straight up to my old room, the one I lived in as a teenager, leaving behind me a trail of dried wine and wilted flower petals. That night, lying in my childhood bed, I cried. I cried for lost love, for broken dreams, for stolen innocence. But I also cried with relief, with liberation. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The next morning, I woke up with the first rays of the sun. For a brief moment, everything seemed normal, as if the previous day had been a bad dream. But reality quickly caught up with me. I went down to the kitchen where I found my parents and my friends already seated at the table. They fell silent when I arrived, looking at me with a mixture of worry and expectation. "Hello everyone," I said in a voice that I wanted to be confident. "Who wants coffee?" My mother jumped up. "Sit down, sweetheart. I'll take care of it." I sat down at the table, aware of the eyes on me. "Look," I began, "I know you're worried about me. And I'm grateful. But I'm fine. I really am. Emily," my father said softly, "you don't need to pretend to be strong for us. What you went through yesterday." I interrupted him gently. "Dad, I'm not pretending. Yes, I'm hurt. Yes, I'm angry. But I also feel free. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I can breathe." Marie looked at me curiously. "What do you mean?" I took a sip of the coffee my mother had just served me, searching for the right words. "You know, since I've been with David, I've always felt like I had to conform to certain expectations. To be someone I wasn't really. Yesterday, when everything fell apart, I realized how much it had weighed on me." Sophie nodded, understanding. "I see what you mean. You always seemed different when you were with him." "Exactly," I agreed. "And now I can be myself again. It's scary, but also exciting." My mother put a hand on my shoulder. "And what do you plan to do now, darling?" That was the big question, wasn't it? What was I going to do with this new freedom? From this blank page that was offered to me? "To begin with," I said after a moment of reflection, "I'm going to take a few days for myself. To think, to refocus. Then, I don't know yet. Maybe travel a little, like Sophie L. suggested. And then I'll have to think about my work at the gallery." My father frowned. "Are you thinking of resigning?" I shrugged my shoulders. "I don't know yet. But I know I can't continue as before. I need a change." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activities and emotions. There were difficult times, of course. Moments when the pain of betrayal overwhelmed me, when doubt crept into me. But there were also moments of pure joy, of laughter shared with my friends, of deep conversations with my parents. A week after the UN marriage, as we started calling it, I made a decision. I was going to go on a trip, alone. The idea came to me one evening, while I was leafing through an old travel magazine. "Are you sure you want to go alone?" asked my mother, worried, when I told her my plan. "Yes, Mom. I need to find myself, to rediscover who I am outside of all this stuff." My father, although visibly concerned, supported me. "Where are you planning to go?" I smiled, excited by the possibilities before me. I was thinking of starting with Italy. Florence, Rome, maybe the Amalfi Coast. Then I'll see where the wind takes me. Marie and Sophie, although disappointed not to accompany me, understood my need for solitude. "Just promise to give news regularly," insisted Sophie. "And to bring us memories," added Marie with a wink. The day of my departure arrived faster than I would have thought it. Standing in the Charles de Gaulle Airport Hall, surrounded by my family and my friends, I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Do you have everything you need?" asked my mother for the umpteenth time, checking my handbag. "Yes, Mom," I replied patiently. "Passport, tickets, money. Everything is there." My father took me in his arms, hugging me loudly. "Be careful, my chip. And don't forget, if you need anything." "I know, Dad. I'll call you." The goodbye were moving, but not sad. There was in the air as a promise of renewal, future adventures. As I passed the security checks, I cast one last look. My family and my friends were there, making me great signs of encouragement. I smile at them, the heart swollen with love and gratitude. By getting ready on the plane a few hours later, I released my diary. On a new page, I wrote, "Today is starting a new adventure. I don't know what the future has in store for me, but I know one thing: I am ready to face it, my heart open and my mind." This experience injured me, certainly, but it also made me stronger. Who I really am. David, Margaret, if you could see me now, you would understand that your cruelty has failed to break me. On the contrary, she gave me wings. And now, I move on to new horizons, towards a life that I will build in my image. The adventure is just beginning, and I can't wait to see where it will take me. The plane takes off, taking me towards the unknown. But for the first time in a long time, the unknown has not been scared me. He exalted me. Because I knew that whatever happens, I was able to face it. I was finally free to be myself, and it was the most beautiful victories. Italy welcomes me in an explosion of colors, flavors, and sounds. Florence, my first step, was a real open-air masterpiece. Each street, each place seemed to tell a millennial story. I spent my days wandering in the cobbled alleys, stopping to admire a fresco here, a statue there, savoring a gelato on the steps of a Renaissance church. My apartment, a small studio with a view of the Arno, quickly became my refuge. Each evening, sitting on the narrow balcony, I watched the sun go to bed on the city, painting the sky with orange and pink shades. It was there, rocked by the murmur of the river and the distant tingling of the bells, that I began to write. At first, it was only a few sentences scribbled in my journal. Observations on daily life in Florence, reflections on my past, my hopes for the future. But little by little, these scattered notes took shape. Without really realizing it, I started writing a novel. The story was that of a young woman who, after a disappointment in love, started to discover herself through Europe. Of course, there was a lot of me in this character, but over the pages, she came to life, becoming a full-fledged entity, with her own desires, her own fears. The weeks passed, transforming in months. I moved according to my desires, going from Florence to Rome, then to the Amalfi Coast. Each new place brought its share of inspiration, nourishing my story and my soul. One morning, when I took my coffee on the terrace of a small hotel in Positano, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Sophie. I hope you enjoy your trip. We think a lot about you here. By the way, have you seen the news? David got engaged, still. Apparently, it's the daughter of a rich industrialist. I stared at my phone for a long time, surprised by my own lack of reaction. A few months ago, such news would have devastated me. But today, I only felt a slight pity for this poor girl who did not know what she was getting into. I quickly replied to Sophie, thanking her for her support and assuring her that I was going well. Then, inspired by this news, I opened my laptop and began to write. In my novel, the heroine had just learned a similar news on her ex. But instead of collapsing, she decided to use this information to move forward, to free herself definitively from the past. The days continued to parade, each bringing their share of discoveries and inspirations. I surprised myself to laugh more often, to appreciate the little pleasures of life. The taste of a fresh tomato bought on a local market, the feeling of hot sand under my feet, the melodious sound of the Italian tongue. Everything became a source of wonder. It was during my stay in Venice that I received an unexpected call. It was Ms. Lefevre, the owner of the art gallery where I worked in Paris. "Emily, my dear," she said of her warm voice, "how are you? I hope your trip is going well." We exchanged a few banalities before she came to the goal of her call. "Listen, Emily, I know that you are on extended leave, but I have a proposal to make you. We are organizing an exhibition on Italian emerging artists next month. I would need someone to make the selection on place. Since you are already in Italy." I felt my heart accelerated. It was an incredible opportunity, a chance to combine my love for art with my new passion for writing and travel. "It would be an honor, Ms. Lefevre," I replied with enthusiasm. "Where should I start?" The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activities. I traveled Italy, visiting small galleries, artist workshops, confidential exhibitions. I discovered incredible talents, passionate artists who told contemporary Italy through their works. At the same time, I continued to write my novel. The experience of the selection of artists for the exhibition is naturally integrated into my story, adding a new dimension to the history of my heroine. One evening, when I worked late in my hotel room in Milan, I received an email from Mrs. Lefevre. She was delighted by my selections and offered to take charge of the complete organization of the exhibition. "You have an exceptional eye, Emily," she wrote. "I think it's time for you to take the next step in your career. How about becoming full-time exhibition curator?" I stared at the screen, stunned. It was an opportunity that I would never have dared to imagine a few months ago. I felt a wave of excitement overwhelm me, mixed with a touch of apprehension. Was I ready for such a challenge? I spent a good part of the night thinking, weighing the pros and cons. In the early morning, my decision was made. I was going to accept Ms. Lefevre's proposal, but on my conditions. I wanted to continue to travel, to discover new artists across Europe. And I also wanted time for my writing, which had become an important part of my life. To my surprise, Ms. Lefevre accepted my conditions with enthusiasm. "This is exactly what our gallery needs," she said to me during our next call. "A new look, a modern approach. You will revolutionize our way of working, Emily." The months that followed were intense but incredibly rewarding. I juggled between the organization of the exhibition, the discovery of new artists, and the writing of my novel. Each day brought its share of challenges and satisfaction. The exhibition was a resounding success. Critics greeted the freshness of the selection, the diversity of styles, and the mediums presented. I was standing in the gallery on the evening of the opening, observing the visitors rave in front of the works that I had chosen with so much care. It was an exhilarating feeling, the confirmation that I had found my way. That evening, after the departure of the last guest, I sat on the steps of the gallery, a glass of champagne in hand. I thought back to the path traveled since that fateful day when my wedding had shattered. The pain was still there, somewhere, but it had transformed. She had become a driving force, pushing me to surpass myself, to explore new horizons. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from my publisher because yes, in the meantime, I had found a publisher interested in my novel. "Congratulations on the exhibition, Emily. I can't wait to read the last chapters of your book. I am convinced that it will be a bestseller." I smile, feeling a wave of gratitude invades me. Who would have thought, a year ago, that my life would take such a turn? I had gone from a future bride with a broken heart to a respected exhibition curator and a novelist in the making. As if to mark this moment of reflection, a shooting star crossed the Parisian sky. I closed my eyes, making a silent wish. Not for success or recognition, but for the strength to continue on this path, to remain faithful to myself whatever happens. Going home that evening, I released my old diary. On a new page, I wrote, "Dear Emily of the past, I know you are suffering right now. I know you have the impression that your world has collapsed. But I want you to know that everything will be fine. Better than well, in fact. What seems to you to be the end is actually only a new start. You will discover strengths in you that you did not even suspect. You will experience incredible adventures, meet fascinating people, create things you will be proud of. Don't let the pain define you. Use it like a springboard to a better life. You are stronger than you think, no longer talented than you imagine. Trust yourself, your heart, and you will see, life will have wonderful surprises in store. With all my love, Emily of the future." I closed the newspaper, feeling a deep peace invaded me. I had survived the storm, and I was out of it. The future was full of promises, and I was ready to grasp them, one page at a time. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when my wedding had shattered. Sitting on the terrace of my Parisian apartment, I contemplated the city which gently wavered under the first rays of the sun. The Eiffel Tower stood in the distance, majestic and immutable, silent witness of so many love stories, joys, and sorrows. My gaze posed on the copy of my novel, Renaissance, placed on the coffee table. The cover, representing a woman on the back in front of an infinite horizon, perfectly captured the essence of my personal trip. The book had become an international bestseller, translated into several languages. I was struggling to believe that my story, so personal at the start, could have touched so many people around the world. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the sweet bitterness of drink. It had become my morning ritual: coffee, contemplation, and a moment of gratitude for all that life had brought me. My phone vibrated, tearing me away from my thoughts. It was a message from Lucas, my companion for 2 years. We met during one of my exhibitions in Rome. He was a painter, one of the artists I had discovered during my trips to Italy. Our relationship had developed slowly, of course, without haste or excessive expectations. "Hello, my love," said his message. "I hope you are ready for our big day. I love you." I smile, feeling a heat wave advances me. Today was indeed a great day. We were going to inaugurate our own art gallery, a space dedicated to emerging artists from around the world. It was a project that we had fed together, mixing our passions and our expertise. While I was preparing for this important day, I couldn't help but think back to the path traveled. Each step, each decision, each meeting had led me at this precise moment. I remembered my first exhibition as an independent commissioner. I was terrified, convinced that I was not up to the task. But the success had been there, and each following exhibition had brought me more confidence and recognition in the art world. My phone rang again. This time, it was Sophie. Just a little word to wish you good luck for today. Marie and I will be there this evening for the inauguration. We are so proud of you, my friends. They had been there at every stage of my journey, supporting me in difficult times, celebrating each victory. Our friendship had reinforced over the years, becoming an unshakable pillar in my life. I also thought of my parents. Their unwavering support had been crucial in my reconstruction. I remembered pride in my father's eyes when he had held my book for the first time, and tears of joy from my mother during my first solo exhibition. By finishing preparing me, my gaze fell on an old photo framed on my dresser. It was me, the day of my non-marriage, covered with red wine, shiny eyes of challenge. I had kept it as a reminder of this day when my life had changed, from this moment when I had chosen to fight rather than collapse. I left my apartment, ready to face this new day. The streets of Paris were animated, filled with people who are going to their occupations. I loved this energy, this mixture of tradition and modernity that characterized the city. Along the way to the gallery, I passed in front of a newspaper kiosk. My gaze was attracted to a People magazine. On the cover, a photo of David and his new wife, accompanied by a catchy title, "The Leroy Couple by the Divorce." I launched a time to stop, surprised by my total lack of emotional reaction. There was a time when such news would have upset me. Today, I only felt a wave of compassion for this woman who probably lived what I had experienced years ago. I continued my way, realizing how much I had grown, how much I had changed. The pain and betrayal had certainly marked me, but they had also forged me, transformed into a stronger, more resilient woman. Arrived in front of our new gallery, I stopped for a moment to admire the facade. The brand, new look, perfectly captured our vision, to offer a platform to artists who brought a fresh look at the world. Lucas was waiting for me inside, a big smile on his lips. He took me in his arms, kissing me tenderly. "Ready to change the world of art?" he asked me with a wink. I laughed, feeling the excitation riding me. "More than ever," I replied. The day passed as in a dream. Last preparations, interviews with the press, rehearsal of the opening speech. Each moment was responsible for positive energy, a feeling of accomplishment. In the evening, when the guests started to arrive, I found myself alone in my office upstairs of the gallery. I needed this moment of calm before the whirlwind of the inauguration. I took out my old diary in my bag. It had become a kind of tradition for me to write there during the important moments of my life. I opened a new page and began to write. "Dear Emily, today marks the start of a new chapter. While I am about to inaugurate this gallery, I can't help but think about the whole path. 5 years ago, I was broken, lost, convinced that my life was over before I even really started. Today, I stand here, stronger and more fulfilled than I have never been. This trip was not always easy. There were moments of doubt, nights of tears, days when I almost abandoned. But each test made me stronger, Each obstacle overcome brought me closer to the woman I wanted to be. I learned that happiness is not a destination, but a path. I learned that love, real, begins with self-love. I learned that life is made up of ups and downs, and that it is our reactions to adversity that really define us. I am grateful for everything I experienced, even the most painful moments. Because without them, I would not be who I am today. I am grateful for the wonderful people around me, for the opportunities that presented themselves to me, for the strength that I found in me. To all those who will one day read these lines, I mean this: do not be afraid of pain, do not be afraid of change. Kiss them because they are the catalysts for your growth. Believe in you, in your dreams, in your ability to get up after each fall. Life is a wonderful adventure, full of surprises and opportunities. Enter them, live fully, like without reservation. And above all, stay faithful to yourself. With all my love, Emily. I closed the newspaper, feeling a wave of emotion overwhelming me. I was ready to face this new chapter in my life, ready to continue to grow, to learn, to love. We hit the door slowly. It was Lucas. "They are all there," he said slowly. "Are you ready?" I got up, smoothing my dress with a nervous gesture. "Yes," I replied with a smile. "I'm ready." Hand in hand, we went down to join our guests. The room was full, buzzing with excitement. I live my parents, proud and moved. My friends, Sophie and Marie, who made me an accomplice wink. Artists whose works I had exhibited, art critics, journalists. While I walked down to give my opening speech, I felt deep peace spoke to me. I was exactly where I had to be, doing exactly what I had to do. "Ladies and gentlemen," I started, my voice clear and ensured resonant in the room. "Welcome to New Look. Tonight, we are not only celebrating the opening of a new gallery, but also the power of art to transform our lives." While I was talking, sharing my vision and my hopes for this space, I realized that it was not an end, but a new beginning. Life was a continuous journey, made of twists and surprises. And I was impatient to discover what the next chapter reserved me. Night had fallen on Paris, but for me, it was the dawn of a new adventure. And this time, I was ready to kiss her fully, with everything she would bring, joys and challenges. Because that was the true beauty of life, the constant opportunity to reinvent yourself, to grow, and to love.